If you root for the Warriors, I know exactly the feeling that lingers after yet another night when the team looks stuck, without the breath to keep up with the speed at which the rest of the league keeps reinventing itself. It's that uncomfortable thought that comes back again and again, almost without knocking. Is the Curry-era story already entering its final stretch? Because it's not just the loss or the inconsistency that weighs on you. It's the context. It's looking around and seeing rivals growing, stacking talent, getting ready to dominate the next seasons, while Golden State holds on to heavy contracts and bets that some young guys will still flip the switch in time. And that hurts, because the fan doesn't just want to watch the end of a cycle. He wants to see one last grand act. Now comes the dangerous part of this conversation. What if there were a real path, even if almost insane, to put Giannis next to Steph? Not as an internet fantasy, but as an idea that, on paper, could be discussed by people who make decisions in quiet offices filled with numbers. And when I say dangerous, I really mean it. Because a trade for Giannis wouldn't be a common negotiation. It would be a choice of identity. It would be a brutal all-in, one of those moves that either throws you into a new title race or speeds up a traumatic rebuild. Let's think about this possibility like two fans talking during a game, without romanticizing anything, without the filter of blind hope, just facing the cold logic and the emotional weight of what this would demand. Because the phrase, "the only way for the Warriors to get Giannis," is already loaded from birth. It doesn't suggest an adjustment, it doesn't suggest a targeted reinforcement, it doesn't suggest a little push for the roster. It suggests rupture. And it all starts with a rumor that, when it involves a star of this caliber, doesn't even need to be confirmed to set the whole league on fire. The idea that Giannis could be rethinking his future in Milwaukee is the kind of spark that creates a blaze even on concrete floors. The domino effect is automatic. Because when a player who is the face of a franchise considers other horizons, everyone with ambition starts calculating possibilities. Golden State, in this scenario, couldn't pretend they didn't hear it. It's an organization that knows what it means to win with a clear identity, with a strong culture and a generational star guiding the team's direction. But time demands its payment, and as much as it hurts to admit it, Steph's window isn't infinite. So when the slightest possibility appears of putting beside him a player who combines physical dominance, defensive impact, and the ability to carry an entire offense, the franchise has to at least run the simulation. Even if it's scary, because the central word here is only one: sacrifice. Giannis isn't just another great star. He's one of those athletes who reconfigure the league's hierarchy, who change how teams build rosters and how coaches design game plans. An MVP, a champion, a force of nature on the court. And precisely because of that, if he is ever available, the price won't be symbolic. It will be devastating. And there's a first obstacle that many people ignore when they dream about trades like this: the money math. Giannis's salary is the size of an earthquake inside the league's rules. To fit a contract at that level, it's not enough to send smaller pieces and a few draft picks. You need to send big salaries back. That already pushes Golden State into an uncomfortable zone because it means important names would have to be on the table from the start. That's where the fan feels the ice down the spine. Because every time this kind of trade shows up in the imagination, we know the hidden script. There is no clean way. There is no package without pain. Milwaukee, if they decided to give up an icon like that, wouldn't accept a return based only on expensive veterans. They would want something that points to the future. Youth with a high ceiling, players who can become pillars, valuable picks that can support an intelligent rebuild. And that completely changes the type of offer required. On the Warriors' side, that means facing the real value of their young players. Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, Moses Moody. Putting those names into a proposal isn't just filling out a list. It's dismantling a bridge that has been built between now and tomorrow. Because these players represent something Golden State has been trying to preserve for some time. The chance to compete without the future turning into an absolute desert. And when you send that group in the same package, the message becomes clear. It's like saying, we're not going to wait for anyone's natural development. We're going to bet everything on the immediate power of two superstars and live with the consequences later. From Milwaukee's point of view, that would be attractive. From the Golden State fans' point of view, that feels like a knife cutting through an entire transition plan. There's a kind of loss that doesn't show up on the spreadsheet. It's the loss of the stories we invent in our heads, the evolution you imagine, the growth you bet on, the hope that one of these young guys will be the next big face of the franchise when the current generation slows down. Trading that for Giannis is choosing the certainty of massive impact now in exchange for a promising uncertainty tomorrow. But there's another layer that's even more sensitive in this discussion, because beyond the young players and the picks, a negotiation of this size almost always brushes up against names that are much more than players. They are symbols. They are living pieces of the franchise's identity. And touching an emotional pillar isn't just a basketball choice. It's a decision that changes the team's relationship with its own history. In these moments, the fan doesn't think only about rotation, defense, spacing, and efficiency. He thinks about loyalty, legacy, memory. He thinks about how many battles that pillar has fought wearing the same jersey. He thinks about everything that was built with sweat, with falls, with comebacks, with glory. And then the debate stops being simple. Because if Golden State wants to make the chance of having Giannis real, it may be pushed towards something many fans would never accept without pain. Giving up a name that represents the soul of the team, even if the reward is a historic duo with Steph. And even then, that probably wouldn't be enough on its own. Giannis would require a robust package with multiple pieces and draft capital. And when you add everything up, the final image starts to become clear, almost frightening. It wouldn't be a trade. It would be a controlled demolition of the current roster. And here is where the question that will guide the rest of this analysis is born. After the sacrifice, what's left? Because the post-trade scenario is where the dream and the fear meet face to face. On one side, you would have Steph and Giannis together, something that, just by imagining it, already changes the feeling of any season. A point guard who destroys defenses with absurd gravity, and a giant who invades the paint as if the game belongs to him. A fit that forces the opponent to choose the kind of suffering they prefer. On the other side, the cost of that build could leave the roster thin, expensive, and fragile. Less depth, less margin for adjustments along the way, fewer young pieces to sustain the energy of the regular season, less flexibility to react if something goes wrong. It's the cruel logic of super trades. You raise the team's ceiling, but you might rip the floor out from under it. And that's exactly why this discussion can't be treated like a fantasy video. It's a real dilemma of sporting philosophy. Betting on the last explosive chapter of a winning era or trying to extend competitiveness with a less violent transition. Let's face the part that separates dream from reality, the package. When we talk about Giannis, there's no shortcut. There's no friendly offer. There's no smart and cheap trade that looks brilliant on Twitter. Milwaukee would only sit down to talk if it saw an exit that didn't feel like a historic defeat, because letting him go would mean admitting, without disguise, that the cycle is over. So the return needs three things at the same time: money that makes the math work, players who keep the team competitive right away, and assets that guarantee real hope for a rebuild. And that's where Golden State steps into almost cruel territory. To start, the difference between imagining and executing is the level of pain you're willing to accept. A trade like this wouldn't happen with the team keeping the same face. The roster would be reshaped with violence. And yes, the salary base would need to involve a big name because Giannis's number is massive and the league won't let you slip past that. The fan feels this conversation like a tightness in the chest because it isn't just about losing a good player. It's about admitting that, to try to win again right now, you have to give up security. And sometimes give up affection too. Think about the emotional impact of that news hitting your phone. It's not the kind of alert you skim, swipe away, and keep living your life. It's one of those headlines that leaves you frozen for a few seconds, trying to understand how the franchise had the courage to pull the trigger. Because every relevant name that goes into a package for Giannis carries a story, and in some cases carries the emotional memory of an era itself. And at the same time, the cold logic of sports screams in your ear, if you don't risk it, you disappear. That's the part that hurts. Because the NBA doesn't reward nostalgia. It rewards strength, health, fit, and boldness. So the question isn't only who would leave. The question is, what would you be willing to accept losing, even if the title didn't come? When you put the young guys into that equation, the weight doubles. Because you're not just giving up rotation pieces or middling bets. You're giving up what was left of a future with the potential to turn into the present. And there's no way to romanticize that risk. If you send a heavy youth package to Milwaukee, you're basically saying you no longer believe in a gradual transition. You're calling this season, and the next few, as the last great road possible. And the worst part is that, from the fans' side, the pain is double. Because if the trade doesn't work out, there's no easy way back. The team ends up with fewer resources to rebuild, fewer draft picks to restart, and less margin to miss on future signings. It's the kind of move that makes a franchise live on the edge. But there's one side of the argument no fan can ignore for long, and it's simple. Few players in history offer what Giannis delivers on both ends of the floor at the same time. You're not bringing in just an offensive star, you're bringing in a walking defensive system, a presence that changes how opponents enter the paint, a force that allows the rest of the roster to breathe. He isn't the kind of player who improves a team. He transforms the entire ceiling of a squad. So the Warriors fans' debate turns into an internal fight between two voices. The first says Steph deserves the strongest possible chance to create one last historic chapter. The second answers that the price could be a deep cut into identity and the future. And both are right. And when we try to draw this scenario on the floor, the idea gets even stronger. Curry's shooting gravity opens attacking lanes that few stars can exploit with as much brutality as Giannis. Defenses would have to choose between protecting the perimeter with extreme attention or closing the paint in desperation. And every time a team has to choose what to sacrifice on a possession, the advantage is on the other side. This isn't just pretty theory, it's the logic of how historic duos destroy defensive planning. You can't keep the same level of pressure on two different monsters if they attack with different weapons. And in this case, the weapons are almost opposite, which makes the combination even more venomous. The big question then becomes, what could go wrong? And here we need to be adults in the analysis. A roster with two massive superstars, without enough depth, becomes hostage to health and consistency. If one supporting piece goes down, the team feels it more. If the bench can't hold key minutes, the wear and tear explodes. If bad nights stack up, the tension rises fast. And worst of all, the margin to correct course would be small, because the assets would already have been consumed in the trade. It's a plan that demands precision. It demands getting the smaller contracts right. It demands that veterans who accept less money actually deliver value. It demands an internal environment strong enough to handle pressure. Because an all-in isn't just a talent equation. It's a mental state. On Milwaukee's side, the logic is just as harsh. If they accepted a trade of this size, they would need to sell it as the beginning of a new cycle, not as abandonment. That's why they would demand a mix of now and tomorrow. Players who help maintain immediate respect and young guys who can become faces of the next project. And draft picks that aren't just symbolic coins but real fuel for a rebuild. So when you put both perspectives together, the full picture becomes clear. Golden State wouldn't be buying Giannis. It would be buying a new timeline. It would be paying to extend maximum relevance while Steph is still capable of leading an era. And the fan, in the middle of this hurricane, ends up split between two legitimate priorities. Preserving a more careful transition or living the last great storm of a dynasty that has already proven everything, but still wants one more championship banner before the clock charges the final price. It's a choice with no simple answer, because it isn't made only with logic. It's made with feeling, with memory, and with fear of the emptiness that comes after a historic era. Because when a dynasty ends in an ordinary way, it hurts. But when you force one last leap and it goes wrong, the pain changes shape. It becomes regret. And still, every time you visualize the offense flowing with Curry pulling two defenders on the perimeter and Giannis finding space to crush the rim, you understand why this idea won't die. You understand why this isn't empty talk. Because basketball, in the end, is driven by rare windows of opportunity. And when one opens, Even for a second, the instinct of a champion franchise is to try to cross through.